Hello everybody, this is Brad Vorbeck with Turnkey Technologies. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our webinar focusing on field service and why it's so important to provide excellent field service experiences to customers in our fast-paced, highly connected world. For those of you who aren't familiar with Turnkey Technologies, we are a business solutions consultant based in St. Louis, Missouri. We focus primarily on the Microsoft stack, but we actually are one of the few Microsoft partners in North America with a core focus on field service specifically. We have one of our field service specialists, Dave Bonney, with us today, and he's going to be your presenter. I invite everyone to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we will get them answered at the end in a Q&A session. And if you want to rewatch the webinar or share it, we will be recording it, and it's going to be available on our website within about 3 to 5 business days, and we will also send that out in an email in a couple days. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and with that said, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Dave.
Thank you, Brad. So the webinar today is about beyond satisfaction, exceptional field service, and the importance of that. And going through this webinar today, there's going to be 3 primary points that I want to make. Number 1, I want to reinforce the importance of service, and specifically field service, for any organization that is either manufacturing, distributing, or just a pure service organization that has field service as a component. The second key point that I want to make is kind of the elements that are around excellent field service. So what does it take to provide excellent field service? And then the third thing is to educate you on kind of the rapidly changing landscape and how digital transformation in the electronic world actually impacts not only the way that your customers expect field service to be provided, but the method and the processes that you use to provide that field service. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is what is field service management. And I like this definition. It's relatively simple. It's got a lot of rights in it, and I like rights. So it's having the right person at the right place at the right time with the right skills and the right equipment. So what that means, just to go back, that's basically getting your people there at the right time and making sure they're equipped and skilled enough to do it. So why should your business care? So this is why is field service or service for any kind of a business important? Because one of the things it's going to do, it's one of the key differentiators in how customers will do selections of you versus your competition, and it's how you keep customers. So some of the key statistics related to that is that 86% of consumers are actually willing to pay for a higher level of service if that's available to them, a better customer experience. So cost is not the primary factor in necessarily determining what service a customer will potentially go with or what product they will go with. The second kind of important factor is once they've actually had a bad experience, that customer is 65% likely to leave that brand and that customer service, whatever you're representing in terms of your service business or products, are 65% likely to leave it based on that bad experience. So you lose customers through bad service. The other key thing is with the internet and social media and really all of the ways that you can use the internet to kind of evaluate businesses and make decisions, that if you provide bad service, you can't hide it anymore. And I'll give you kind of a good example of that. So I was recently in Florida and went out to dinner several times. And every time I went out to dinner, we used basically TripAdvisor and Yelp to find out who the best restaurants were. We looked at how other people evaluated it. We looked at how many stars were there. And every time the decision we made on that was a good decision. So if you're providing poor service right now, the chances of a potential customer knowing that is extremely high, and the chances of them not selecting your business is high. So with that in mind, we understand that it's extremely important for kind of your growth and vitality that you provide, good customer service. And the other thing, this is just some of the financial numbers behind that. And basically, a customer that you have is worth 10 times as much as that initial, usually sale or initial purchase that they had with you. And this can be related to a customer can come out, purchase a product, they can actually leverage you for service over several years, and they'll, if they purchase another product and they have an ongoing relationship, or they replace the one that they originally had, and you've been providing good service, they're very likely to use you as the company to replace their original product. It's very expensive, 6 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to keep one. 97% of consumers said customer service is important to their choice of loyalty to a brand. So in other words, if you provide good service, they're going to stay loyal to the brand or the service that you're representing. And like I mentioned before, 78% of customers have bailed or not made an intended purchase, like my description with where to go eat, because of someone who reported a poor customer service experience or just your own personal experience. So companies that have this service as an element within their offering or their product, whatever it is that they're doing, it's difficult to achieve sales growth without providing good customer service. So now what we're going to do is look at some of the factors that affect that, and what the definition kind of is of good customer service from your customer standpoint. One of the questions that key items they may ask is it easy for our customer to request service and track? So it must be easy. You don't want to have a customer who has to call up on the phone and wait to get a response and not really know what the level and when they're going to get service. So it's important for them to be able to request service easily through multiple types of media, either through a portal, it can be through email, it can be through a call, and it's also probably just as important when they request a service to know the status of that service and have some expectations around when it's going to be provided. Another key question, am I responding to service requests based on customers' priorities and timing? So when you initially engage with a customer, it's very important to capture the information around, what the level of the service issue is and what the impact is to a customer and kind of what their expectations are on when that service needs to be provided. But equally as important, when you actually get that information from the customer, you must be able to capture it and track it across all the different individuals and components involved in providing the service. Another key question is our customer engaged in the service call? That may sound like a rather silly question to ask, but what that implies is, number one, not only when you capture the information, but when you provide the service, are you giving them options in terms of if there's different paths they could take? Do they feel like their issue and their pain, and that you're capable of educating them along the way, and that when they make the decision, they're making a decision not only just based on cost, but what's based on the long-term, basically their long-term needs related to that service call. Another key question is, and this is one of the key components that you usually measure within customer service, is what % of calls are fixed on the first visit. So a good example of that was when my air conditioner went out a couple of years ago, and it was a well-known brand, and it was kind of a common issue. But it took 2 service calls to get it fixed. The first service call, the problem was diagnosed, and the second service call, it was fixed. But in between those 2 times, which involved a day that was 95 degrees outside, and my wife wasn't happy. So not necessarily a good customer service experience. And there's additional cost and overhead associated with that second visit that isn't recouped from the provider's perspective. Another key question is the customer informed on when we will arrive? So in this very digital world that we're in now, the customer needs to know from the initial commitment of when you're going to show up or when you're going to provide the service, and kind of every step along the way. Does the customer see value based on our history with them? So this gets back into kind of the ongoing relationship that you need to have with your customer. And if they continue to see value, they're going to continue to actually do business with you. And this gets back to the whole third slide that we talked about, the value and maintaining an existing customer versus going out and mining new customers. Are there additional services we could offer that would improve customer satisfaction? So, just providing service especially if it's some sort of outage, may not always be, the best answer. It's important to understand kind of the trends and ways that you could avoid service outages in the future by offering different services, preventive maintenance or monitoring services. There's a big push in the industry right now around IoT, which is internet connected services, where if you have monitoring devices on a piece of equipment, it can actually measure temperatures, it can measure all types of voltages, things like that, and actually predict when a piece of equipment needs some sort of service, and automatically send that information to you as a service provider, and you can use that to generate, automatically generate work orders and actually do preventive maintenance on it before the equipment fails. A good example of that was when, and I love this company, was Caterpillar, when they had all kinds of monitors embedded in their very expensive CAT devices, their bulldozers, their mining equipment, and it would actually monitor pressures, it would monitor temperatures, you could actually monitor the amount of metal that was in that was actually in the fluids in it, and it would predict when something was going to fail very accurately and would actually dispatch parts and a service technician before it actually failed. The third thing, and this is really important, we've got some somewhat cool pieces of a demo that'll show this. Can we understand kind of the service trends, and can we project new service offerings? So if you're not doing this, I would contend that probably your competitors are looking to do this. So those are some of the key issues that are affecting service excellence. So the thing that we mentioned earlier, and kind of the focus on this is, it's easy to identify with the problems, and it's easy to recognize the statistics that point out kind of what the impact is of service on the overall revenue stream. But one of the pieces that's rapidly changing right now is that the technology that surrounds both what your customers expect in terms of service and how you can provide a service. And if we look at kind of the history of how basically systems and technology is changing, if you go back probably 5 years, even 5 years ago, you saw a lot of kind of monolithic computer systems and things of that nature, where you'd have a financial system, you'd have a manufacturing system, and you'd have a field service system, and they may or may not be connected. And the data that was in those systems may not necessarily be linked together. There may be some high level of connectivity out there where that you had accounts and things like that were common across systems and services and things like that, or some kind of invoicing or billing may be connected between them. But the underlying nature of how things acted and reacted together and kind of the impact of that couldn't really be understood because of the limitations in terms of how data was connected together. And the other key component, we're going to talk about this today, is that the amount of customization that needs to go on to really stay up with the emerging trends and services out there. Is your system easy to change? Is it connected together in a way that when you make a change that the pieces already know how to work together, or is it very involved, and the more kind of monolithic they are and the difference the underlying technology is, it's very hard to keep kind of the information and the processes connected between your different systems. So in a digital world, you must embrace change. And this is actually Microsoft's definition of embracing change, and they have 4 pillars that they promote out there. One is engaging your customers, the other is empowering your employees, the other is transforming your products, and the other is optimizing your operations. So we're going to go into that a little more detail in each one. So let's talk first about engaging your customers. So number one, when engaging your customers, let's talk about how you align and how you actually align yourself with your customers' pain points. And one of the key questions to ask in this is, could this service request have been avoided? So providing service and doing it in an optimal fashion is good. avoiding that service in the first place is better. How critical is the service? So this, we're getting back to what information you capture up front. Is that service critical to your customer? Do you understand the impact of that service? Is it impacting their revenue streams? Or is it something that can wait? How confident are you that the service delivery commitment will be met? So in other words, when you commit to a customer, even with the initial commitment in terms of a date and time that this is going to happen, how confident are you that you have the processes and the technology in place to meet that commitment? And the other thing that's important is that, when you have customers, if you can keep a connection with them in terms of previous services that were performed, kind of the history of their equipment, that's extremely important to building that customer loyalty. And it may not always be possible to have the same service technician available for that customer every time an emergency arises or there's some service that needs to be performed. So it's important that you have that information maintained within your systems, and that information is available to the technician when they're on site. So the second kind of within engaging your customers that's important is communicate. Okay, so in a digital world now, communication is becoming much easier because of the underlying technology that's employed. So from the time your customer initiates the service request through a phone call, it could be email, website, whatever, it's important to capture that initial request, kind of know the reasons behind that initial request, and then let your customer know you've got the request and when the service is going to be scheduled. And a lot of this can be done now automatically through the technology. So at any point in time, from the time of the initial request to the time of the first service call, or the time that you initially schedule the service call, as that service call moves closer and closer to actually being executed, to keep continually informing the customer using whatever medium is best for them. It could be text messaging. It could be a phone call that's automated and sent out to them, notifying them of the schedule. It could be an email. It could be just an update on the portal. But the important thing is that when the customer initially engages you that for a request, that they be kept notified as soon as they can after that initial request, because that's a big component in customer service. Even if it's just to say, we've got your request, we're processing it, we'll give you a service date within, by tomorrow or X number of hours, just to let the customer know that you've got it, you're handling it, it's in your system, and that when the expectation is of when they should be either notified or when that'll be scheduled. And the other thing, so that's kind of before the fact, but then after the fact too, it's important that your customer, when you get done with the service, they don't want to just know what they got billed for the service. They want to understand as much as they can kind of the components that went bad possibly, or the service that was provided if it wasn't necessarily a mechanical fix of some sort, and kind of the value in that service. Did it extend the life of their equipment? Do they have another warranty associated with whatever product was replaced? Any of those type of things that help them understand that what you did was in their best interest. And the other thing we found that's extremely important, and this is where, mobile devices, especially tablets and things like that, can be helpful, where you can actually collaborate with your customer. They may have an option to repair or replace, and to just kind of know the cost and what the expected maintenance costs will be in the future with a new piece of equipment versus an old one, can help them make a decision and make them feel part of the process. The third kind of part of engaging your customers is that you need to have some sort of accountability with your service. You need to know, and a lot of it, everyone gets tired of seeing these surveys come out after service has been provided, but you want to know if whoever responds, if your service has met delivery expectations. Usually the responses you'll get most consistently on that is if they haven't. So sometimes receiving no response to a survey is a good thing. Are your costs, what your customer expecting? I mean, you can let them know up front the estimates and you can confirm it when you're there, but is it, within the range of what their expectations are? Were there any surprises in that? What was the quality of your service? Are there products that would improve your customer experience? Are there, additional tools or pieces of equipment or products that could be installed that would actually improve the reliability or the quality of the service? And you need to understand trends. So we're going to get into all of that today through some of our demos and everything. So first thing we're going to do is going to go into a demo on engaging your customer. So I'm going to switch over to my demo screen right now. And what you're seeing is part of the Dynamics 365 field service experience. And I'm starting off with a screen that shows basically work that's already been assigned, and we're going to back into kind of the customer service aspect of how it got in here first. But you can see a couple of different things in here. Number one, a picture, I would contend, is worth 1,000 words. So we're seeing, in this case, we're seeing the individuals here on the left. We're seeing the work that's been assigned to them. At just a quick glance, we can tell that Van is pretty well loaded up. We can tell that Rocus V is a little underworked right now, and we can see that there's some availability with both Jorge and Luke up there in between noon and 2. So the key thing of this is that you want to be able to keep your service technicians as engaged as possible in actually servicing your customers for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it creates the better customer service experience that we talked about earlier, where you can service them quicker, which is always going to be a better thing, depending on their schedule. The other thing, there's a financial impact to having your service technicians not fully engaged. So this gives you a really nice graphic representation of what's going on. But there's another key thing from kind of measuring your service and the quality of how well you're keeping them engaged in the customer. And part of it is travel, which has an impact on how long it's going to take to get to the customer, as well as your overall profitability related to providing that service. So if you see these little tails that come out here, green in this case means that this service is in progress. So by looking at this and by using mobile devices, what you're seeing here is that when the service technician arrives on site, their mobile device is notifying the scheduler that they're on site, and it's turning it green. This little green tail that's out here in front that I'm hovering over shows the travel time associated with that based on where the technician was either at the previous service or where they start their day at. You see this lighter blue color here. This indicates that the service has been provided. And you see the darker blue here is one that's still open and where the service technician hasn't arrived on site yet and started delivering the service. The other thing that's important, we talked about having the right person with the right skill at the right time. If we hover over these individuals, we can see the skills associated with them. So one of the examples we're going to be talking about today is this MRI equipment and this X12 machine that's been having some service issues. And so we have several service technicians that actually have the certifications like Jorge here to work on MRI equipment. But as we go through here and demonstrate how this software works, it will actually automatically align a service request based on those skills and who has the skills and the location that's going to get that person to the location the quickest. If you look over here to the left, you'll see a map showing kind of the routes that are involved and, seeing kind of the optimal, if it's an optimal schedule you've got set up on them based on the various different service stops. So if I click on over here, we'll see a line to the left, that green line, appear and disappear on Jorge that shows, his stops along the way, as well as where he'll finish up, which is the last one over here to the right. The other thing that this map allows you to do in this kind of interactive dynamic scheduling is that you can actually take Jorge and you can see he's got a little bit of gap in here, and you can see there's another service request down here that's represented by this red pin. So if we wanted to, we could actually drag Jorge down to here, and it would give us the option of scheduling Jorge at that customer between 12:15 and 12:39, and we can see that corresponds to his gap up here. So that allows you then to provide a service to a customer and minimize kind of the disruption on your previously scheduled events, because the key of this and customer service is a predictability of when they're going to be there, but still having the capability to take a priority event and squeeze it in where possible, so that you can you can handle a customer that has some drastic event going on that needs immediate attention. So this provides the capability to do that. Now, if we look down at the bottom, we're seeing basically our unscheduled service work order requests. And you'll see here we have something that's labeled as an emergency. And the way we've got this prioritized right now is that those priority events will actually cycle to the top. So if I click on that, I know that that's something I need to address immediately, and I'll click on the Find Availability button. And it's going to go out and actually determine when that can be scheduled. And I see I have a couple of different options. I have Mike Smith I could schedule it with, and I've got Luke Lundgren. So I've got two different options of when I can get that scheduled and how quickly I can get a service technician out there, and it's based on their current location as well as their current status. So I'm going to go ahead and book that to Mike Smith for now. And that's going to go ahead and actually assign that to Mike Smith on the schedule board. So if you see, we now have another work order out there for Mike Smith. And we can see, because there's a very small line, that Mike Smith was very much in that neighborhood. So that's kind of how we optimize our resources, how we commit to our customer we're going to be there. So when I just drop that in for Mike Smith, there's been an automatic notification that, we have your emergency request. We'll have Mike Smith out there roughly at 2:30 today to start working on 12:45 is the exact time he's going to be out there. So we'll send that notification to the customer in whatever means they want to be notified. And Mike Smith will also be notified on his mobile device that he is going to have, after he finishes this work order 64, he's going to go to this work order over here at a customer that's very close together. So that's kind of the dispatching and how we optimize our technicians and how we communicate with our customers and how we can take an emergency work order and squeeze it in and kind of minimize the impact on our other customers. So now let's go take a look at how this request or how a request like this initially came in. So one of the key components of the Microsoft stack is that you have everything in the Dynamics 365 world is highly integrated together. So one of the pieces of that is case management, which is basically taking information, a service request, and making some evaluation on whether it's something that can be handled through a customer service rep, through providing more information, through researching invoicing issues or things like that, or if it's something that needs to have a service technician actually dispatched, and kind of the nature and how critical that is. So we're looking at an example right now for a customer called City Hospital Number 1, and you can see our process ribbon up here, which is going to drive us through this process and determine whether or not we need to create a work order or whether we can just resolve it on our own through some sort of information we provide to customers. So if we look down here, we see a couple of interesting things. Number one, we see this is our friend, the X12 MRI machine that's having a problem. We see the equipment, we see where the equipment is basically located. So that's an actual piece of equipment with a serial number and an install date associated with it. And based on that, we've done some research here to determine, what type of service request that is. So if I click the Find button over here, what this is going to do, it's going to find similar cases that have these kind of characteristics associated with it, which in this case was an MRI machine that's got kind of the long cycle going on. And we'll see we have a couple of instances where there's other customers have had that issue. So if I look over here to the right, I can see that we can see another instance where a customer had an issue on that, and it required replacing the power supply and the lithium battery. We see another issue over here where another customer had an issue. where we scheduled a work order, but we have, this is providing us good information on that similar type of case that showed up and how it was resolved. So after looking at this and doing our research, we have a pretty good idea that this may be related to this same power supply and lithium battery issue we had before. The other kind of cool feature that Microsoft has right now is this thing called the Service Hub, where I can go over here and I can actually look at our city hospital, number one, and see, from a customer standpoint, what we've done with them in the past and kind of what the history has been with them. And if we look down through this, we can see that they've had several issues with this X12 MRI machine, where it's had these long cycle issues, and maybe we didn't replace the battery or the lithium battery in the power supply in the past. But we can see that this is something that needs to be addressed. We can go look at, some of the other things we can look at in here. We can go and look at what other service requests we have out here. Basically, our service requests, or just look at kind of the landscape of the service requests that are out there, and we can see that we've had several of these MRI 12. We've had 4 of them out there where there's been MRI machine outages, and a lot of them have been related to either the intermittent outages or restarting. We could bring these up and look at the history behind them and how it was resolved in the past. So it's giving us an indication of basically the history behind these particular products that are having an issue. We can see down here kind of the origin of how some of this information came in, either by phone, by Twitter, or in this case by email, and the case resolution trend by date. So that's very good information to know as you get ready to schedule this for a service technician. So if we go back over to our case over here, we've kind of now determined what the issue is. We've looked at other customers who have had this issue. So we're going to go ahead and progress this through. And we're going to go on and create a work order for this. So what we've done actually from the case, we've been able to automate the process of going out and creating a work order that can be scheduled by the scheduler. A couple of key things that's important to do. We now know that the priority on this is going to be very emergency related, okay, because they've had issues before. Work order type is going to be service. It's already filled in the primary incident type. We determined that while we were evaluating the cases. We know we can fill in the primary customer asset, which in this case would be the MRI machine in the West Wing. We can, it'll go ahead and we could fill in additional information that we got from the customer. This is the 3rd time this equipment has gone out, which I just messed that up. I messed up the primary incident type. Got to go back and get that in there. But you get the picture. I've got more records. Excuse me while I go back and redo this again. I'll put the incident type back like it's supposed to be, which are MRI equipment. And this is the 3rd time this equipment has failed. Please fix. And it could be a lot more detail than that. Let's scroll down here, make sure service call. We got the price list filled in, everything else taxable no, so we should be able to go ahead and save this. And what it's going to do is well, sales tax code should be no. Save that. And it's going to go ahead and create the work order and put it out on the board so it can be scheduled. So that's kind of a quick overview of basically a couple of different things, how we capture information from our customer, how we make a determination early on of what we need to do to resolve the issues, and how we actually get it scheduled out there, and how we make sure that if it's an emergency situation, we can get it treated a little bit faster. So let's go back and we'll look at our slideshow again. So the next piece of this that we're going to talk about is empowering your employee. And in this case, and in a lot of cases associated with field service, the primary instrument you're going to use in that is your mobile device. So basically, to sum it up, everything that you've got in the system out there, the nature of the service request, the priority, the information that they need to fix that, where they need to be at and when they need to be there, all of that information needs to be available to your service technician through their mobile device. And the way that you communicate with that is basically anything that's in the system, okay, that we've captured in the system, any information that's in that system should be available internally to the customer service rep, to the scheduler, but you also want that information available to your technicians. So in addition, they got to be able to access manuals and things like that. They got to be able to see a history of what's been done on that equipment, so they have an educated way to talk to the customer. They need to be able to identify options. If there's a schedule change, they need to be notified of that right away. So all of that is made available through the mobile device. And then the third piece of this is evaluate, that you need to be able to evaluate how well your service technician is performing, if they're getting their jobs done within the expected time based on historical data, and was the quality of the service what your customer expected. And in a lot of cases now, did that technician actually follow up and make the additional sale if it was possible, in terms of replacing obsolete equipment or equipment that was failing rapidly, or at least advise on replacing key components when necessary. So all of that is key information that you capture based on your service technician's interaction with your customer. So how do we empower it? We talked about this, the mobile technology, their access to field managers, and when they're on site, being able to do estimates and capture real-time information. And a third thing on here that's probably important to identify too is that when you're there, do your technicians have the ability to generate basically information back to your customers, such as estimates for new work, in terms of giving them some sort of feedback on the services that were performed so that they can verify the services and get signatures on completion of that work. All of that is important, and all of that's done through the mobile device. So now we're going to go through just kind of a quick demo, and I can't really drain this in much detail because there's so much here, but I'm going to show you kind of a quick demo of what the mobile device looks like. So what I'm showing you here is the mobile device that your service technician, and this is being actually run on a fairly outdated old Galaxy Tab 4 with not a big form factor at all, but the capabilities are pretty good, kind of regardless, good on any Android or iOS device. And the first thing they might want to do, and I'm kind of jumping around here, is they may want to, if they're starting their day off, if you remember what we talked about earlier, having the right equipment and the right products with the right person at the right place. So the first thing, one of the first things they may want to do is go out and see what type of products they have on their truck. So this is actually can be their truck inventory. And what we could show, this isn't a real good representation, but what we can show on here is the products that they have on the truck and what's been allocated for that day for that service technician to use to actually see if they got all the products they need. This will give them a breakdown of their work orders that are out there, so the number of work orders that are scheduled for them, and it'll show the different type, whether it's an installation versus a service call. And the last thing on there will be, if they wanted to do, this is actually their time off request, where they can go out, and if they want to have time off, they can go ahead and request time off, or if they want to take that long lunch hour, or they have some doctor's appointment in the afternoon, they can go ahead and enter that information, get it approved by their supervisor, and it'll show them as unavailable on the schedule board. So that's part of kind of the mobile experience out here. But the other thing that's important is that your customer or your service technician needs to be informed of the service they're going to provide and when they have to be there and kind of what the schedule is. So this is a daily view showing what they still have, what Mike Smith still has available to do for the day. And you'll see the next service appointment he has on here is this work order 64, and you can see underneath that is 66, which is one we just added from the interactive schedule board. So if we look at this, we can see all the information related to that work order. We can, when he starts traveling, we can change his status to traveling. When he gets on site, we can change it to in progress. One of the other key things we can do on here is we can look at, if I scroll back up again, I can look at the map and I can see the location. It can go ahead and route me there, as well as I can go look at the piece of equipment that's going to be serviced, this X12 machine, and we can look at the history of what's been done on it. So it's showing the work orders down there in previous work. I'm bringing that up. I can see, you know, they installed and calibrated it. All readings were within tolerance. I'll know the date that that happened, and I can also go back and look at pictures that were taken at the time that that happened, which is extremely important if you're looking at a piece of equipment that is starting to have issues and you want to show trends in terms of how it's degrading. So real quick, if I had a picture out there, I could bring the picture of this up and see what the equipment looked like as a specific, I mean, this is a lot of it I entered today, but you could look at it date specific, and you can watch the trend of that equipment as it actually deteriorated over time. So this basically, the other thing it does, it gives them access to all the documents when they're in there, as well as, you know, the history of the equipment, and basically will give them step-by-step instructions of the service that needs to be performed. So to go back, so that's how you actually empower your employees. And remember, the information they're entering here is being captured real-time on the system, on the main online cloud system or your on-premise system. So it's not information that's only available to the service technicians. It's also available to basically available to everyone to analyze and to be able to track the time they were there and kind of the results of that service engagement. So that's the second peer, empowering your employees. And the third one we want to talk about is transforming your products. So what does transforming your products look like? So this is something that I feel like is extremely critical when you consider kind of, if you're looking at actually getting engaged and looking at improving your field service execution, and you're looking at different products, this is a key consideration that you need to have. There's a lot of products out there that can perform kind of the field service step 1, step 2, schedule, process, make sure you got the parts there, do some of the things we just looked at. But what's really important is that you not only have the ability to execute on that, but you have the ability to relate to kind of what's been happening out there and what the trends are and everything else. And Microsoft is doing a very good job of embedding Power BI to kind of gather this information for you. And part of this relates to the transformation of the services you're going to offer based on the changing nature of what's happening out there and what the technology is doing. So first step we talk about here is align. You know, do you have the ability to align with what's going on and capture the trends? Do you have the ability to communicate? In other words, if you see these trends and things going on, there's going to be various people who may have specific insights into why that's happening. It could be someone in the service. It could be someone in financial. It's important to understand all the aspects of this as you go through and you actually look at kind of the trends and what's happening and how you may want to modify how you offer products and services. So it's got to be something that's available across all kind of tracks of the business, not just the operations manager. And the key to this is evaluation. Can you evaluate kind of what is happening, and is there a way that you can a product that'll help you understand kind of the trends and what's going on? So this brings us up into our last kind of key component that we want to look at. And in this case, it's the Power BI. So all of the things that we've been doing out there have been captured and put in this analytical tool so we can look at, you know, what's happened so far and why it's happened and what the trends are. So the first thing we're doing is looking at open work orders here. And if you look at this, it looks like Rocus V has been pretty engaged in this. So I can click on Rocus and I can see that Rocus has performed one inspection but he's one installation, but he's been very heavily involved in service calls. And to me, that service calls may or may not be, it may be something we want to reduce based on the nature of why the service is happening. If we look at Jorge here, we see that he's had 5 service calls, no inspections, and no installations. So he's been all service calls. Luke has been kind of a mixture also. So we can kind of see what the nature of the work order types are and why that work's being performed, whether it's an installation versus a service versus an inspection versus preventive maintenance. It's whatever kind of categories we want to set up for this. Another key one to look at is, that I'd like to look at, is work order duration by month. So we can kind of look and see, if we look at here, kind of we've had 68 service calls, 68 inspections, and 30 installations. We can click on this and we can see the average duration and what type of service call there was. So we can see that our friend, the MRI cycle is intermittent, has been causing a high degree of service calls as compared to printer issues, which is another one. So that tells us a couple of different things. It tells us that this is something we need to spend more time on analyzing why we're having that issue. It also speaks to inventory we may want to keep on the truck relative to the issues and the product issues that we're having. And I like the way it does it too. It's showing you based on these 68 that there were 7 of them that were solved in 0 to 1 hours, and 2 of them, and this is actually hours over here. This is minutes and this is the number. So 7 that were in the 0 to 1 hours, 2 of them were in the 1 to 2 hours, and 1 of them was in the 2 to 3 hours. So we kind of can go back and look at those individually if we want to and see kind of what that particular work order was and why it took longer, and if it's an issue with not having the part, and actually improve our service based on what we find out from that. And the other one that's I kind of like to look at on this too is the account. And that's because it's showing us basically revenue by account and the type of business. So as I click through on these, I can see that St. Mary's Sisters of the Poor was 8,000, and these numbers are not real representative, but $8,000 in sales. If I click down here, I can see that A-Data Medical, which is the one we just looked at, had basically $2,300 in service revenue, and another, we did the installation for free, so that was probably based on equipment purchase. But it gives us a history of the customers and what kind of service has been performed and kind of the cost of them, and we can use this to kind of analyze, how well we're doing with maintaining our customers and the type of service and the costs associated with this, and kind of where to go in the future. So pretty valuable tool. So a couple of key points I want to make before we kind of wrap this up. And these key points are this. We talked about transforming your products and kind of the digital transformation, and just to kind of impress this to a product in this case, in the case of what we're talking about here, as a service. So a product is anything that you provide on your customer to your customer that benefits them. So in the case of customer service, your product is your service. And with the rapid changes, you need to be able to quickly have a platform in place that will allow you to react to changes in customer expectations around us in terms of the equipment that they may have and the capabilities built into that, as well as your ability to be able to respond and communicate quickly and be able to extend to your technicians all the information that they need in the products, and make sure that when they get on site they have the right products and tools and skills to actually execute. So this is basically presenting the case that it really needs to be on an extensible platform. It needs to be integrated. In the next slide, I really like this slide. So this kind of shows you the value in the Microsoft stack in kind of a graphical way. So this is representing functionality that we talked about, where we have support cases and we have service requests. we could have in here accounts, and we can have financial, and we can have equipment maintenance, and we can have time entry, because when your customers or your service technicians are out there, they're recording their time each time that they make a different point during their process during the day. So you're capturing all the time. That could be used for multiple different things. So this is kind of your transactional aspect, and your operational aspect, and your planning aspect to some extent around kind of the service delivery. But then when you layer on top of that Office 365, this is where you need to really consider kind of how the pieces you're working with from a delivery perspective or an execution perspective or an analytic perspective are integrated with the other key components that you need. Basically, the extensibility and how quickly you are able to adapt to not only the new technology, but how you communicate with your customers. So this is showing with the Microsoft stack, you not only have those operational type systems that are in place, they're also tightly integrated with other products that they offer, such as Office 365 Calendar, the Outlook Exchange type of experience, where you can schedule things in Dynamics 365 and also have that available on your normal calendar that you look at to schedule the date night with your wife. How email messaging, how all that ties together kind of across the board, how you can take Office 365 documents and use those to generate, quotes to your customer. And so all of that ties together, which is a key consideration. And really, as the technology moves forward, Microsoft keeps all that wired in for you so that you're not siloed in a platform where you need to worry about the integration changes as the technology changes. The third thing I really like about this is LinkedIn, which is really becoming a key thing where you can know more about your customer. You can make connections based on that. And once again, if you've got a customer out there, all of that is tied together where you can go in and look at their LinkedIn relationships and things. And you can also use this technology now to help you identify and hire new employees and understand kind of their history of what they've done in the past and their capabilities. So it's really kind of, and all of this is once again tightly integrated with everything that's been going on in your operational side of things. And the fourth piece of this, which is a critical one that you may want to talk to Turnkey about, is kind of the partner solution. So, you layer on that a company like Turnkey where we can come out, we know the field service industry, we know the capabilities of the technology, we know our own capabilities where we focus on not so much the technology, but understanding your business first and then knowing how to apply a solution to optimize the results, and know how to bring this all together in a way that really hits, improves your financial aspect, your relationship aspect with your customers, and your delivery aspects, and just the quality of your products. So having a partner like Turnkey can really help tie all this together in a way that has a significant impact on your business. So just to recap what I said, so a couple of key things that we talked about on here. Number one, we talked about the importance of field service or service in general for any type of manufacturing company and our distributor and our service organization, and how that impacts your growth and vitality of your business. The second thing we did, we reviewed the key elements affecting field service. And the third thing we did was kind of talk you through how the technology landscape is changing and how the expectations on your customers is changing, and how some of this new technology can be deployed to not only improve your service, but improve your customer satisfaction as well as impact your bottom line, which is revenue. So that's kind of a wrap up, and I think we may have some questions. I'll turn this back over to Brad and see if we have any questions at this point that we need to follow up on. Okay, so we don't have any live questions at this time, is what I'm hearing. So with that, I'd like to make sure that we just kind of a couple of other things that I want to address. We do have a free field service assessment we can perform, and what this is, it isn't a form that you fill out that you send back in to us, but it's us going through a very structured interview process where we ask you questions that are specifically related to some of the key issues in field service and capabilities in field service, and we evaluate kind of through that where you're at and give you a chart back that shows your capabilities versus the industry's, what's available in the industry to meet those capabilities or to meet those shortcomings that you have. So it shows the gaps between where you're at and where you could be if you had a more digitally transformed world. So it provides a lot of value. I mean, quite honestly, we do it so that we can prove that, you know, it's a way for us to get to know you. It's a way for you to get to know us, but it's a way for us to kind of prove our capabilities. And if you're interested in that, you know, you can, you know, click on this link here and sign up for the field service assessment, and we will get you scheduled and go ahead and execute that. If there's no other questions, this is Dave Bonney. I really appreciate the time you spent listening to this. If there's any questions or anything else, feel free to email me at dbonney@turnkeytech.com, and have a nice day. Thank you.